The corridor was dim, shadows pooling in the corners where the flickering emergency lights barely reached. Detective Lara Chun stepped cautiously over the threshold of the abandoned office wing, the stale air thick with dust and silence. The aftermath of the latest heist lingered like a ghost. No alarms had sounded, no cameras had caught a thing, and yet something was left behind. On the cracked linoleum floor near the smashed glass display case lay a crumpled piece of paper, half hidden beneath a fallen ceiling tile. Chun bent down, her eyes narrowing as she unfolded the sketch. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a rough architectural doodle, lines, angles, and measurements scrawled hastily, like someone had been caught off guard. But as she scanned the drawing, her breath caught. There, amid the familiar grid of walls and corridors, was a single line that shouldn't be there. A wall drawn where no wall existed in reality. Her partner, Detective Marcus Reyes, leaned in, his face tightening. "You see that? That wall. It's impossible. There's no structure there. No physical barrier. This sketch doesn't match the blueprints." Chen's fingers traced the line again, the ink pressed sharply against the yellowed paper. The room felt suddenly colder, every second stretching taut with unspoken questions. This was no ordinary clue. It was a crack in the foundation of a decade's worth of unsolved crimes. For years, the perpetrator had slipped through buildings like a ghost, always one step ahead. No alarms triggered, no security footage captured, no trace left behind. They called him the man who knew the walls because every escape route seemed to defy logic, as if he bent the very fabric of space within these structures. Now, that illusion was beginning to unravel. Chen's mind raced. If this wall didn't exist physically but was drawn on the plan, what did that mean? Had he been altering building designs, creating secret passages, hidden cavities within the architecture itself? The thought sent a ripple through the team. Their suspect wasn't merely a skilled thief, he was an architect of deception. The silence in the room was broken only by the muffled sounds of footsteps and the distant hum of the city outside. Every investigator present felt the gravity of the moment. A single extra line on a sketch, something so small it might have been overlooked, was now the key to cracking open a case that had baffled them for years. Chun carefully bagged the sketch. This was no longer just evidence. It was a map to the truth. As the team prepared to dig deeper, the walls around them seemed less solid, less certain. Because somewhere within these blueprints lay the secret passages that had allowed a criminal to vanish time and again. And now, with one impossible wall revealed, the chase was finally turning. The tension in the room was palpable as Chun tucked the sketch safely away, his mind racing with possibilities. Every line and curve on that piece of paper whispered secrets, and suddenly, the maze of lies began to unravel before their eyes. The team exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. The walls that had once seemed impenetrable were no longer barriers but invitations, beckoning them to follow the path hidden in plain sight. It's moments like this that remind us why the pursuit of truth matters so deeply. When a single clue can shift the entire narrative, it's easy to get lost in the details or overwhelmed by uncertainty. But that's precisely why sharing perspectives and experiences becomes so vital. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the thrill of uncovering something hidden or the frustration of chasing shadows, I'd love to hear what struck a chord. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of this unraveling feels closest to your own journey. Your voice not only breathes life into these stories, but also builds a community where we can all learn and grow together. And if you find value in this unfolding mystery, hitting that like button does more than just show support. It helps the story reach others who might be seeking answers or inspiration. Each like is like a beacon, guiding more people into this shared space of curiosity and discovery. Plus, if you want to keep walking alongside us as we explore these hidden corridors and untangle the secrets that lie beyond, subscribing is the easiest way to stay connected. Your presence here turns this channel into more than just a place for stories. It becomes a hub where truth hunters unite and thrive. So, if this journey has sparked your interest, don't hesitate to engage. Your participation shapes the path ahead, fueling the momentum that drives us deeper into the mystery. And as the team gears up to follow the map hidden within the sketch, every comment, like, and subscription lights the way forward, reminding us that no secret is too well guarded when a community stands together. He was the kind of man who seemed to dissolve into the background of the office, a fixture as familiar and unnoticed as the hum of fluorescent lights or the faint scent of fresh ink on drafting paper. His presence was steady but unremarkable. No loud bursts of laughter, no sharp opinions in meetings, no social invitations accepted or declined. Just a quiet, methodical figure hunched over drawing boards and computer screens, immersed in lines and angles that only he truly understood. Colleagues often described him as invisible, and in a way, that invisibility was his greatest asset. His role as an architectural technician granted him unparalleled access to the skeletal framework of buildings long before they took shape in the real world. Blueprints, CAD models, structural plans, they were his domain, and through them he navigated spaces that most people would never glimpse. This was a man who could read a building like a book, tracing hidden pathways in walls and voids that others overlooked. While his coworkers saw only a diligent employee completing routine tasks, he was quietly obsessed with what lay beyond the visible. The silent cavities, the secret chambers, the spaces behind spaces, as he liked to call them. It was a fascination that seemed peculiar to those who noticed it at all. In lunchroom conversations, a few colleagues mentioned his habit of sketching unconventional ideas during breaks. Drawings that didn't correspond to any project on the docket, images of labyrinthine gaps tucked between floors, narrow crawl spaces behind walls, and hollowed niches seemingly designed to vanish into the building structure. These were not architectural necessities or practical design elements, but rather exploratory exercises in concealment and invisibility. He never shared the purpose of these sketches, and when pressed, he'd offer vague replies about studying spatial dynamics or experimenting with volume. No one suspected that those quiet moments of creativity were seeds for something far more calculated. His demeanor betrayed no hint of duplicity. There were no signs of financial desperation, no reckless indulgences, no social conflicts. His background was spotless, no criminal record, no suspicious transactions, no history of erratic conduct. To the outside world, he was the embodiment of normalcy, the dependable cog in the architectural machine. But beneath that calm exterior, a restless mind was at work, weaving complex patterns of hidden routes and secret recesses that defied conventional logic. This duality, unassuming technician by day, clandestine architect of obscurity by night, was a puzzle in itself. He possessed the rare ability to move unnoticed through secure areas, his presence accepted as routine. His knowledge of building codes and structural tolerances allowed him to push boundaries subtly, embedding concealed spaces that would evade casual inspection. The very qualities that made him invaluable to his firm also made him frighteningly effective at hiding things where no one would think to look. Hints of his obsession surfaced in small ways. An offhand comment about the beauty of negative space during a design review. A personal notebook filled with cryptic diagrams and annotations in the margins, never shared with anyone. An uncharacteristic fixation on maintenance tunnels, service corridors, and ventilation shafts, places most architects regarded as mere infrastructure, but to him were realms of possibility. It was as if he was designing not just buildings, but hidden worlds within them. His colleagues, caught between admiration for his technical skill and bewilderment at his eccentricities, never imagined the darker potential of his fixation. The quiet man who blended so seamlessly into the background was, in reality, constructing a labyrinthine canvas for secrets that would soon surface in ways no one anticipated. The question remained, what was the true purpose behind those spaces he so carefully concealed? And how far had he gone in turning these architectural fantasies into realities that could alter the course of everything? Long before the first alarm ever sounded, long before the frantic searchlights sliced through the night, he was already inside the walls, not as a trespasser, but as a ghost architect, weaving subtle alterations into the very fabric of buildings under the guise of routine maintenance or minor renovations. His genius lay in invisibility, the kind that defied the naked eye and conventional scrutiny. Each adjustment was microscopic, a whisper in the blueprint, yet monumental in consequence. Imagine a seemingly solid wall. To the average observer, a barrier. To security personnel, an impenetrable obstacle. But in his hands, that wall became a gateway. He would shift it by mere inches, too little to warrant a second glance during inspections, too precise to disrupt the building's structural integrity. Yet those inches mattered. They created narrow voids, hidden channels that could accommodate a slender figure slipping through without a sound. These cavities were cleverly masked as utility conduits or support beams, their existence written in the blueprint as structural tolerances or ventilation ducts that no one would question. His modifications were never blatant. Instead of tearing down walls, he extended existing ventilation shafts, transforming them into winding escape routes. These paths snaked through the building's underbelly, often intersecting with maintenance crawl spaces or forgotten service tunnels. By lengthening and redirecting these airways, he crafted a secret maze accessible only to someone who knew the exact sequence of twists and turns. In daylight, such passages appeared as benign architectural elements, but under the cover of darkness, they became invisible highways to freedom or entry. The brilliance of his method was in the cumulative effect. Each job he undertook, whether a minor office remodel or a larger construction project, brought incremental changes. Over months and years, these small alterations layered upon each other, transforming the buildings into complex puzzles. No single modification raised alarms, but together, they built a silent network of escape and infiltration routes, exclusive to his knowledge. The buildings themselves became accomplices, hiding secrets in plain sight. Visualizing his handiwork requires peeling back layers of concrete and steel to reveal what lies beneath. The walls conceal hidden niches just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The floors hide trapdoors disguised as maintenance panels, their latches recessed and flush with the surface. Ventilation shafts, extended by a few feet here and a turn there, connect to air handling units or rooftop outlets, providing discrete exits high above ground level. Each component is meticulously designed to avoid detection by sensors or cameras, relying instead on the building's own complexity to shield its secrets. Logically, his approach demanded an intimate understanding of architectural engineering and building codes, not to exploit loopholes, but to work within them so seamlessly that his alterations would never trigger suspicion. He balanced structural safety with clandestine function, ensuring the building remained sound and operational. This duality was his signature, a perfect crime constructed not through force, but through design. By embedding his routes within the architecture itself, he circumvented conventional security. No locks to pick, no alarms to disable, no windows to break. Instead, he simply stepped through the invisible doorways he had built long before. When the time came to execute his plans, his knowledge of these secret passages gave him an unassailable advantage. Security teams scoured every inch of the building, yet found no breach. He never broke in because he never needed to. He moved through spaces that were always there, yet never truly seen. His crimes were acts of architectural sleight of hand, illusions crafted over years, revealing a masterful manipulation of space that left authorities chasing shadows. In the end, his signature was not just the crimes themselves, but the method. An invisible blueprint layered beneath the city's surface, waiting silently for him to slip through and vanish as if the building itself had swallowed him whole. The night wrapped the building in a heavy silence, broken only by the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional drone of a security patrol's radio. He slid through the shadowed veins of the structure, moving with a grace that blurred the edges of reality. His footsteps, soft as a whisper, traced a path through the maze of corridors and service tunnels, spaces that most would never notice, spaces designed to be forgotten. Every motion was a calculated note in a symphony of precision. Panels slid open under the press of a hidden latch. Vents yielded to his weight without so much as a creak. Cameras, once vigilant, now looped a rehearsed sequence, their blinking red lights mere actors in a staged performance. Entry points bore no scars of forced entry. Every lock had been undone in perfect silence, every alarm bypassed with the skill of a surgeon. He navigated the building's underbelly like a phantom, his presence erased by layers of preparation and cunning. The air smelled faintly of cold metal and aged concrete, mingling with the sterile scent of cleaning agents. He breathed in rhythm with the building's mechanical heartbeat, the soft thrum of air circulation, the distant click of automated systems adjusting themselves. Each breath was steady, controlled, a metronome in the unfolding heist. Yet, beneath this seamless flow, a brief crack appeared. As he turned into a rarely used service corridor, the steps slowed. For 8 seconds, an eternity in his world, he hesitated. The pause was imperceptible to the naked eye, but the thermal sensor caught it like a ripple on glass. His body lingered in the narrow passage, heat pooling faintly against the cold walls. The cause of the hesitation was subtle, a flicker of doubt, a second glance at the intersection ahead. Perhaps a shadow shifted differently, or the faintest sound unsettled the rhythm. His fingers twitched near a concealed panel, but the motion faltered, hesitation folding over his practiced confidence. The building seemed to hold its breath with him, waiting. Then, as quickly as it came, the hesitation passed. He pressed forward, slipping through a panel that revealed an access ladder descending into darkness. The metal was cold against his palms, grounding him again. His movements resumed their fluid cadence, the choreography of a master thief back in full swing. The rest of the heist unfolded like clockwork. He entered the vault room, bypassed the last layer of security with deft precision, and secured the target, a collection of priceless artifacts shielded behind layers of glass and steel. The weight of success settled over him, a familiar rush that surged beneath his calm exterior. But that fleeting pause, the subtle falter in his seamless execution, was a seed planted in the soil of perfection. It hinted at a crack in the armor, a moment where control wavered, where the unshakable gave way to uncertainty. It would be small, almost invisible to anyone but the most discerning eyes, yet enough to unravel the narrative he had so carefully constructed. As he retraced his steps, the building's pulse resumed its steady rhythm. The shadows embraced him once more, swallowing his form as if he were never there. The cameras continued their loop, the logs recorded nothing unusual, and the entry points remained unblemished. Everything looked perfect, but in the silence of that 8-second hesitation, the first thread of his downfall had been woven. Detective Ramirez crouched low amid the debris-strewn corner of the vault room, eyes scanning the floor for anything out of place. The air was thick with dust and the faint metallic tang of cold steel. His partner, Agent Keller, moved a few feet away, sifting through a pile of scattered papers that had been hastily discarded. Most were mundane receipts, delivery notes, a few faded blueprints of the building's lower levels. But then Keller's fingers froze on something different. A folded sketch, aged and creased, tucked beneath a broken panel. With deliberate care, Keller unfolded the paper, revealing a roughly drawn floor plan. The lines were uneven, the handwriting hurried but precise. At first glance, it resembled the official blueprints they had reviewed countless times during the investigation. But as Keller's eyes adjusted, a sliver of doubt crept in. Something was off. "Ramirez, come look at this," Keller called quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ramirez joined him, and together they studied the sketch under the harsh glare of their flashlights. The layout mimicked the known structure, but unlike the clean, engineered precision of the original blueprints, this drawing included an additional wall, a thick, jagged line, cutting through a corridor that should have been open space. Ramirez frowned. "That wall, it doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist." Keller nodded slowly, tracing the line with his fingertip. "I've cross-checked this with the original plans and the building schematics. No mention of it anywhere. No permits, no construction records. It's like it was never there." The room seemed to shrink around them, the hum of the ventilation system suddenly louder in the silence. This was no simple oversight. The extra wall was a phantom, an impossible element in a structure that had been meticulously documented for years. Why would someone add a wall that doesn't exist? Ramirez muttered, voice tight with suspicion. If this was the criminal's sketch, maybe it's a way to mislead anyone following him. Keller studied the lines again, eyes narrowing. Or maybe it's a mistake, an accidental trace, but it's the first mistake we've seen in years. Every other detail lines up perfectly with the building's architecture. This wall is the outlier. Ramirez's mind raced. They had been chasing a ghost. Someone so careful that no physical evidence had linked him to the crime scene. But here was a crack in the facade, a flaw in the perfect plan. The sketch wasn't just a copy of what existed. It was a map of something that didn't. Could the wall be a secret partition? Something hidden? Ramirez suggested. Keller shook his head. No signs of reinforced structures or hidden doors behind this line. We ran scans earlier. Nothing's there. The implications settled heavily between them. This was no accidental error from a blueprint technician. It was deliberate, or at least intentional enough to reveal the criminal's hand. A momentary lapse, a slip in the mental map that had guided the heist. Ramirez folded the sketch carefully, eyes lingering on that impossible wall one last time. If this is the first mistake, it's the one that'll break everything open. They exchanged a glance, the weight of the discovery sinking in. The perfect plan had a flaw, a wall that should not have existed but did. And from that shadowed line, the investigation found its footing again. The impossible wall, once dismissed as a mere architectural anomaly, became the fulcrum upon which the entire investigation pivoted. Agents meticulously examined the original sketch, overlaying it with the blueprints from the target building, and there it was, a line that defied logic, cutting through structural norms and spatial conventions. That subtle, crooked mark was no accident. It was a deliberate insertion, a cipher embedded in the ink, waiting to be deciphered. The team began by isolating this wall as a reference point, a fixed coordinate amid a shifting sea of architectural shifts. Every blueprint from Ramirez's known projects underwent a rigorous side-by-side comparison. Millimeter adjustments in wall thickness, vents rerouted just enough to avoid detection, staircases misaligned by fractions of an inch. All these tiny deviations suddenly gained new meaning. When mapped relative to the impossible wall, patterns emerged like constellations in a night sky. It was as if Ramirez had been playing a complex three-dimensional chess game. Each piece moved with precision to create secret corridors and hidden chambers. Visual aids became indispensable. The investigators layered translucent sheets over the blueprints, marking the impossible wall in bold red ink. From this anchor, they traced the subtle shifts. Lines gently nudged, ventilation shafts rerouted, walls slightly askew. The hidden passageways, invisible during construction and unnoticed by occupants, revealed themselves in these faint discrepancies. The team began to see a recurring blueprint signature, a set of 3 vents forming a triangle near the impossible wall, a series of wall angles deviating by exactly 2.7 degrees, and door placements offset by 5 centimeters to conceal access points. Each building told a similar story. In City A, a public library's blueprint had the impossible wall running through its main hall, with vents cleverly disguised as decorative grills. In City B, a government office showed the same pattern of shifted corridors aligned with that wall's trajectory, creating an underground network of hidden rooms. The realization struck hard. Ramirez's manipulations were not isolated incidents, but a sprawling web spanning multiple cities. The impossible wall was the master key, a spatial constant behind his entire architectural deception. Tension mounted as the investigators cross-referenced timelines. The modifications coincided with known criminal activities linked to Ramirez's aliases, suggesting these hidden passageways were more than architectural curiosities. They were conduits for illicit operations. Smuggling routes, secret meeting rooms, escape paths, all encoded within the blueprint's subtle deviations. The breakthrough came when a junior analyst noticed a recurring symbol embedded near the impossible wall's location. A tiny geometric pattern, a stylized hourglass, etched faintly in the corner of several blueprints. This mark, once overlooked, was likely Ramirez's signature, a breadcrumb trail left intentionally to mark his handiwork. The team's excitement was tempered by the weight of what they'd uncovered. A systematic, deliberate manipulation of urban spaces designed to remain invisible to all but the most discerning eye. As the investigators reconstructed the past, they pieced together how each millimeter shift served a purpose, how each impossible wall was a node in a covert network. The very fabric of the cities had been altered silently, invisibly, by Ramirez's hand. The impossible wall was no longer an anomaly but a revelation. A key that unlocked the hidden architecture of crime, reshaping the investigation's course and exposing the breadth of deception woven tightly into the urban landscape. The investigation into Ramirez's actions revealed more than meticulous planning and architectural brilliance. It unraveled a deeply personal narrative embedded in trauma and obsession. As agents sifted through his background, a pivotal detail surfaced. His childhood home, a modest structure nestled in a quiet neighborhood, had been lost to flames years prior. The fire wasn't a random disaster, but the tragic result of a structural flaw that had gone unnoticed, overlooked by the very system meant to ensure safety. This loss was not merely physical. It fractured a fundamental sense of security that had anchored Ramirez since childhood. Interviews with acquaintances and family members painted a portrait of a man haunted by that day. The fire left scars beyond the charred remains of wood and plaster. It carved a psychological fissure that would dictate the course of his life. The home, once a sanctuary, became a symbol of vulnerability and helplessness. Ramirez internalized the failure not just as an accident but as a betrayal by architecture itself, a discipline he would later come to master and manipulate. This early trauma seeded a relentless drive, a compulsion to reclaim control over spaces that could no longer betray him. What emerged from this was not a straightforward vendetta but a complex psychological motive rooted in an obsessive need for order and dominance. Ramirez's crimes were not financially motivated. They were acts of reclamation. Each altered building, every impossible wall erected, was a manifestation of his desire to rewrite the rules that once failed him. By bending architecture to his will, he sought to construct environments impenetrable to chaos and loss, spaces where he alone held sovereignty. This obsession extended beyond mere structural modifications. It was an assertion of identity and mastery over a world that had once rendered him powerless. Ramirez's meticulous manipulation of urban landscapes became a means to impose a new order, one where vulnerability was eradicated and control was absolute. His actions blurred the line between genius and fixation, revealing a man who had weaponized his expertise not for profit or fame, but as an emotional bulwark against the trauma that had defined him. The investigation uncovered chilling evidence of this mindset in his personal writings and design notes. They revealed a man fixated on permanence and invulnerability, with annotations emphasizing the elimination of weak points and vulnerabilities. His vision was not of beauty or innovation alone, but of fortresses, spaces designed to withstand not only physical threats but the unpredictability of fate itself. This was a psychological fortress as much as a physical one, constructed piece by piece through his clandestine alterations. Yet, the emotional weight driving these crimes was not one of justification but explanation. The investigators understood that Ramirez's obsession was rooted in pain, but it did not excuse the harm wrought by his actions. His manipulation of buildings had real consequences, endangering lives and undermining public trust. The human cost was undeniable, and the pursuit of control had transformed into an obsessive compulsion that disregarded the societal fabric he altered. In the end, Ramirez's motive was a blueprint of obsession born from loss and the desperate need to reclaim agency. The fire that destroyed his childhood home ignited a lifelong fixation on control, shaping a man who sought to govern not just structures but the chaos within. His crimes were a silent battle against vulnerability, fought through the very walls and spaces that define human experience. The investigation laid bare this psychological truth, casting a stark light on the fragile line where trauma can morph into destructive fixation. The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against the skin and dulls the senses. Outside, the city hummed with distant life, unaware of the trap closing quietly within its midst. The man moved with practiced ease, his steps soundless as he slipped into the shadowed corridor. One more passageway carved from the blueprint of his mind, a hidden artery in the labyrinth of his own making. He believed himself untouchable here, a ghost walking walls no one else could see. Investigators watched from concealed vantage points, their breath steady despite the tension coiling like a spring. Every detail had been calculated, Every risk weighed against the promise of capture. They had tracked him to this building, a structure he had shaped with obsessive precision, filled with secret doors and false panels. Now they waited for him to step into his own snare. Inside, the man's fingers brushed the cold, familiar contours of the masonry. The faint echo of his movements was swallowed by the thick walls, but his mind raced ahead, anticipating the path he had so meticulously designed. His sanctuary, his fortress, until tonight. As he reached the concealed entrance, a subtle click resonated, the sound almost imperceptible, but it was enough. Behind him, two heavy steel doors slid shut with a finality that echoed like a verdict. The sound vibrated through the hidden corridor, sealing off both ends. The man paused, a flicker of disbelief cutting through his calm. Walls he had built to contain others now imprisoned him. The irony was cruel and absolute. He pressed his hands against the cold bricks, the very elements he had manipulated to grant himself freedom now mocking his efforts. The air was thick, stale yet charged with a latent energy born of confinement. His breath quickened, chest tightening as the reality of the trap sunk in. For years, he had mastered the art of slipping through walls, vanishing into spaces others never knew existed. Tonight, those invisible spaces had become a cage. Outside the sealed passage, the agents exchanged glances, hearts pounding but faces composed. They had anticipated his move, predicted his need to revisit the secret places he trusted most. Now, watching the flicker of panic cross his features through the small viewport, the weight of justice settled heavily. This was more than capture, it was poetic retribution. Minutes stretched like hours in the dim corridor. The man's fingers traced the lines of the blueprint clutched in his trembling hands. The paper was worn, a map of his mind's architecture, every hidden door and passageway meticulously drawn. His eyes settled on one detail, a wall he had added late in the design, a barrier meant to confuse intruders, a safeguard he thought infallible. His voice was barely a whisper as he stared at the plan, the irony stabbing deeper than any physical restraint. I shouldn't have drawn that wall. The agents stepped forward, their presence no longer hidden. The man met their gaze. A flicker of defeat mingled with the lingering pride of a creator ensnared in his own creation. The silence was broken by the click of handcuffs closing, a final seal on the chapter he had tried to rewrite. In that moment, surrounded by the walls he had built to control chaos, he was utterly powerless. The labyrinth that once promised freedom was now his prison, and the man who moved through walls had finally been stopped by the very architecture of his mind. The courtroom fell into a heavy stillness as the prosecution unveiled the blueprint, the one piece of evidence that unraveled the entire saga. At first glance, it was just a technical drawing, a network of lines and rooms, corridors and doorways. But there, in the corner of the page, was the line no one had expected. An extra wall, a single, faint stroke that changed everything. Prosecutors called it the most expensive extra wall ever drawn, and the phrase echoed through the media, through hushed conversations in legal offices, and in the minds of everyone who had followed the case. For the investigators, that extra line was a key, a tiny but crucial slip that unlocked decades of secrets. It was more than just a misplaced architectural element. It was a symbol of human error, a crack in the perfect facade of control the man had built around himself. Every altered building, every impossible escape route, every so-called invisible passage that had confounded law enforcement was connected by that line. The invisible labyrinth the man had claimed mastery over wasn't unbreakable after all. It was fragile, susceptible to the slightest oversight. The symbolism of that extra wall transcended the blueprint itself. To the media, it became a metaphor for the downfall of a man who thought he was untouchable, who believed his intellect and cunning could outwit the world. Headlines splashed phrases like, "The wall that brought down an empire," and one line, "Endless consequences." Commentators debated the irony of a single pencil stroke, an act so small, so seemingly insignificant, destroying what was once an empire of shadows. It was a reminder that no matter how complex a plan, no matter how meticulously constructed, the smallest mistake can become a fatal flaw. Prosecutors seized on that symbolism, weaving it into their narrative with precision. They painted the extra wall as the physical manifestation of the man's hubris, the point where his control slipped and everything began to unravel. They described how, when that line was found, it linked every crime scene, every escape route, every impossibility back to him. No longer could he claim innocence or ignorance. The blueprint was his confession in ink and graphite. The emotional weight of this discovery was palpable in the courtroom. Witnesses who had once been baffled by the man's seeming omnipresence in every crime now saw the pieces fall into place. Families of victims, who had waited years for answers, felt a bittersweet vindication. The man's empire of invisible passages was not a fortress but a house of cards, and that one extra line was the breath of air that toppled it. Even among the investigators, there was a quiet awe at how such a minute detail could carry so much power. It was a testament to the painstaking work of those who refused to be deceived by surface-level perfection. The extra wall was a beacon, guiding them through the maze of lies and misdirection toward the truth. It reminded them all that sometimes, justice is won not by grand gestures or sweeping evidence, but by the relentless pursuit of the smallest inconsistencies. As the man sat quietly, handcuffed and resigned, the significance of that extra line hung heavily in the air. It was the invisible boundary between freedom and capture, between illusion and reality. The maze he had built in his mind and on paper had collapsed, not under the weight of overwhelming force, but under the fragile weight of a single, unintended detail. The empire of shadows was no more, and the man who had moved through walls now faced the ultimate confinement. One crafted by his own hand, marked forever by that one extra, fateful line. In the end, the intricate web spun by a mastermind was undone not by a grand revelation or a fierce confrontation, but by a single, overlooked imperfection. The man who prided himself on flawless planning found that his greatest strength, his meticulous attention to detail, became his undoing when one small element escaped his scrutiny. That extra line, that subtle inconsistency, was enough to shatter the illusion of invincibility he had carefully maintained. It serves as a stark reminder. No matter how brilliant the design, no structure is without its weaknesses, and no crime, no matter how perfect it seems, is ever truly immune to failure. This story shows us that the difference between freedom and capture often lies in the smallest details. The boundaries between what is possible and what is inevitable blur when even a minor flaw disrupts the whole system. The man who moved unseen, who believed he had mastered the invisible boundaries of his world, was ultimately confined, not by external forces, but by the very framework he created. His empire of shadows crumbled quietly, revealing the fragile nature of perfection itself. In the realm of crime and justice, it's often these tiny mistakes, missed clues, overlooked evidence, a single unexpected variable, that tip the scales. They remind us that no plan, however sophisticated, is foolproof. The human element, the unpredictable slip, the unnoticed detail, all play pivotal roles in unraveling the most carefully orchestrated schemes. This story stands as a testament to the power of vigilance, both in the pursuit of justice and in the understanding of human fallibility. If you found yourself captivated by this unraveling of a perfect crime, stay with us. There are countless stories where the impossible is undone by the smallest slip, where the cleverest criminals are undone by the tiniest cracks in their armor. Subscribe now and join us as we continue to explore these fascinating investigations. Each one a reminder that even the most flawless plans can falter in the face of a single, overlooked detail. Don't miss what's coming next.